everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Olympic Breakfast Debrief, brought to you in partnership by British Rowing and Junior Rowing News. My name is Fergus Mainland, host of the End of the Island podcast, and this morning I'm delighted to be joined by 3 fantastic guests. We've got Zoe De Toledo, Olympic silver medalist. We've got Sarah Cook, an Australian Olympian and world rowing commentator, and I'm also delighted to be joined by Martin Gough, rowing journalist. We've got lots of action to unpick that's happened in the early hours out in Tokyo, and we'll start, Sarah, I think first of all with the quarterfinals of the women's single sculls. We've got lots of the big names back in action once again. Not, I think, similar to the heats that we saw earlier on in the week. Not too many surprises, but I think the first big shock will be Vicky Thornley placing third in her quarterfinal.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see those quarters because on paper the women's single scull is certainly one of the strongest events and was really hard to pick coming in because we haven't seen some key players. You know, Hannah Pratt-Katson sort of burst onto the scene this year. Emma Twigg hasn't been able to race for a couple of years. So there were a lot of unanswered questions, and I think Vicky Thornley showing some really good form leading up to this. But yeah, a bit of a shock to see her sort of lead out. For me, she looked a bit sort of tense in that first part of the race and went out really looking to stamp her mark and wasn't sort of able to maintain it. She didn't have that sort of cool look that some of those other scullers had about them. So I wonder if she was a bit apprehensive coming into that race and racing Pratt-Katson. But for me, I've been obviously accused of fangirling Emma Twigg, which I will, own up to because I think, she's fantastic and I'd love to see her take it out. And I actually feel really good about that tip now.
I'll join you in fangirling Emma Twigg there, Sarah. I think she's looked brilliant in those first 2 heats. Heard an interview with Vicky Thornley afterwards saying she was happy with that first half, but that there was work to do in the second half, and I'd echo that. I mean, you look at the times through the K there, and Pratt-Katson and Thornley pretty much even and ahead of the other heats. But has that taken too much out of her in the first half, so she can't maintain the second?
I was just going to say, I think looking at times in the singles is a bit of a dangerous game because obviously, when you look at times in big boats, an 8 or a quad goes out and pretty much maintains the same speed for the whole race. But singles, they have so much to play with in terms of their own speed and how they control themselves. They're going to react a lot more to what's actually going on in the race around them. It's good, obviously, that Vicky's time is up there. The problem is that third place finish puts her in a harder semi. So she's going to be in a semi with more first and second places from the quarterfinals. And that's, I think, where the danger lies for her. Because, we talked about it earlier on in the week, didn't we? There's such depth in this women's singles field. I think it's going to be, I think the semis are going to be probably some of the best racing of the regatta in this event.
So Martin, is she going to be all right in the semi-finals? Is she going to be able to book a slot in the A finals for medal contention?
I wouldn't pretend to understand the labyrinthine draw for this event and what semi-final she gets into. She seemed to be saying that she would be in the same semi-final whether she finished second or third, although I guess it will affect the lane draw there. I would say based on what we saw in the heat there that she should be capable of making the A final. Today less assured, I suppose.
And Zoe, another labyrinth to get round on the flip side is the men's single sculls. And I think similarly to the heats that we've seen earlier, it was the guys we would expect to see winning once again: Norway, Denmark, Croatia, Germany, the big names, and probably the top 4 finishers come A final time. The question is just in what order they're going to finish.
Yeah, I think this is a really difficult one to call. Like you say, it maybe seemed a bit more predictable in terms of the finishes, sort of where they lay, than the women's did. But I don't know. I think again, it's difficult to compare across these heats because you don't know what these guys are holding in their hand. And whilst I don't think there are any big surprises in the men's singles, you never know what's going to happen when you put these guys alongside each other. I think still, Oliver Ziegler from Germany, I think he's still the pick for me as long as things don't get too rough. He looked pretty comfortable, I'd say, and he looked quite confident. But who knows? I think, yeah, it's all there, and there's always going to be some funny old mind games being played as well, no doubt. So
Looked a lot more comfortable. Ziedler looked a lot more comfortable today than he did in his heat, where he looked really quite tense to start off. Looks a lot more chilled today, didn't he?
I thought he looked like he was kind of playing a bit of a game with them. Like, I was listening to Martin Cross's commentary, and he was saying he looked like he was, just taking it kind of easy. And probably in the third 500, I was watching him, and it did look like he was kind of just playing a game of cat and mouse, just doing enough to stay in front. I reckon there's another gear for Ollie just watching him. But it's cool to see Demir Martin back. He sort of struggled for form since Rio, and it was great to see him looking really good. And Kettle Bork as well coming back into form. Coming into this regatta, I was fully on board with Sverre Nielsen, but I'm going with Ziedler based on what I've seen so far.
Very interesting. It's going to be another fascinating showdown, particularly in the semis once we start to see these guys squaring up against each other. And the final itself is a whole other kettle of fish. It's going to be very, very exciting. But what we'll do now, we'll just shift through the boat classes. We had semi-finals today for the men's and the women's double sculls, and we'll start with the latter. We'll start with the women's double sculls. We haven't got a GB crew racing, but Sarah, we do have an Australian crew racing. Sadly for them, 5th in their semi-final and heading to the B final. But what did you make of the semi-finals for the women's doubles generally?
I mean, that Romanian crew are just unbelievable. They're my pick, and they haven't disappointed in either the heat or the semi-final. Interesting with the Kiwis to switch Hannah Osborne in and Liv Lowe out into the quad. I'm not sure if that's working out how they wanted to, because obviously they were outclassed by the Romanians today. So disappointing, I think, for the Kiwis, the world champions, to sort of not be there at the front of the field. I definitely fancy them for a medal. Gutting for the Aussies, they're a top sculling boat, but they are a super young crew. Tara Rigney, literally straight out of under 23. She's our top single sculler in Australia, so I think look out for her in future years. Really tough race for those guys to miss out on the A final, but probably not all in all surprising. But yeah, I think it's hard to go past the Romanians for me.
And Martin, I guess no surprise seeing the Dutch winning the semi-final that the Aussies were involved in.
Yeah, no surprise. Although it was a decent battle there with the Canadians right the way down, wasn't it? And I think that Canadian double, Gabrielle Smith and Jessica Zverev, have shown that they're capable of a medal too. So there's probably 4 crews there who would expect to get on the podium.
the Dutch are having a great regatta, aren't they? All over, they're both their doubles, their men's 8, both their quads. I think I got a bit nervous when I saw that their men's sculler had COVID, and I was thinking, oh no, is this going to take out a bunch of their crew boats as well? But it looks like they seem to be staying separate in their team and stuff, and they look safe. But I think it's really impressive. Not necessarily surprising, but it looks like they've got their last bits of preparation right as a team, and they're all kind of coming to their peak all at once.
Yeah, the Flying Dutchmen are certainly starting to take off in Tokyo. I think Mark Hunter had similar COVID concerns yesterday, but touch wood for the Dutch, they're going to be okay and can produce some high quality racing come finals time. But Martin, what we'll do is we'll have a look at the men's double sculls now. We had Great Britain back in action again, 2nd place for them this time, 2nd behind France, who of course set that Olympic best time in the heats. I think another strong performance from the British duo.
Well, a strong performance from the British duo. I mean, they were tense, and they admitted to the nerves in that after the heat. And I just thought it looked just patient throughout, really. And what sort of surprised me was, they were sort of in a bit of a battle with the Polish, and the Polish I know sort of dropped off a little bit in that final quarter. But I don't think GB did anything particularly special. They just stepped on. and that's a really strong showing. I think they're going to be full of confidence after that.
And Sarah, as we just alluded to, the Dutch have about having a very good regatta so far. Well, they've just done it again. They've won another double semi-final.
That was unbelievable, going through the Chinese like that. I mean, you could see that the Chinese were worried after their heat. They didn't have the heat that they probably expected to, so they really went out hard in that semi-final. And to see the Dutch just power through them was quite remarkable. So that Dutch double, definitely hot favourites. I think the French have been my tip, and I thought that they were really patient the way that they rode that other semi-final, and really impressive. But I agree, the crew that sort of, I think, really impressed today was the British. But on the flip side, the crew that really, I think, surprised everyone was the Irish. The silver medalists from 2019 had that really great tussle in Lucerne to take the silver medal, really way off the back in their semi-final. So devastating for Bernard Doyle from Ireland to not make the A final.
Yeah, definitely. So Zoe, obviously one crew we haven't mentioned is the Swiss double. They were third. Are they still in with a shout for the medals, or is it going to be down to those top two crews in the respective semis?
I don't think the Swiss looked as good in the semis as they had in their heats. You know, in their heats, you kind of saw them and you thought, oh, this is a crew that actually has kind of snuck up out of nowhere a little bit. Having said that, it's hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, the crew from not Russia, or the not Russian crew from Russia, were actually just behind them. They weren't far off, so it didn't look like they were just controlling it and having a lovely time. I don't know. I mean, there's always time before the finals. I think it's hard to look past, really, for me, the Dutch, the French, the British, maybe the Chinese as well. You never know.
Yes, we'll see. We'll see when it comes to that A final action. Now, certainly two races that I think had just about all of the British rowing community up in the early hours of the morning was the two repêchages for the quads races. Now, Martin, we'll start with the men's quad, and I think we can all have a big sigh of relief after that. Through to the A final. Here we go. Bring on A final action for the men's quad.
Bring it on. And obviously the men's quad is an event that GB have never won an Olympic medal in. I mean, they came into that repêchage as I think the fastest crew from the heats to have ended up in the repêchage. So they must have been confident, but it was just the way they rode it, the way they established their rhythm, and the way when Estonia and China were sort of knocking spots off each other to try and get that second place, and GB just stayed out front and kept doing their thing, raised the rate a little bit, but just stayed on it and didn't get drawn into that. I thought was really impressive.
And Sarah, I think as we talked about in yesterday's debrief for the 8 side of things, it's no bad thing actually having a repêchage, particularly when you've only got your heat and then your final. Sometimes actually having that second race in the 8-day regatta is actually quite a useful thing.
I totally agree. I mean, I always found that in my career. It's not like I'd intentionally go through a repêchage, of course, but I always found that having that extra race, particularly at an event like the Olympics, can be really helpful. The Aussie men's quad went through in the heat straight through to A final, and that was my first thought. Oh my gosh, they've had one race and they were, a bit flustered. They didn't look as relaxed as normal, but they did the job to get through in the heat. But I thought, oh my gosh, their next row is the final. That's a bit scary. So, I think having that repêchage, as long as you can get through safely, can be a really beneficial thing. And I thought that the British men's quad looked really strong. But yeah, seeing some of the crews that missed out, I mean, that German men's quad, like, it's a boat of superstars, and it's just really never found its mark. And of course the Norwegians, I mean, gutting Olaf Tufte, 7th Olympics, what is he, 45 years of age now, absolutely incredible. So sad, when you see an athlete like that miss out on the A final, but yeah, it was really great race happening up the front of the field.
Yeah, sad for Olaf Tufte, but to be honest, I think we'll probably see him in Paris. Knowing him, he'll probably just keep going and going. Might even race in Los Angeles as well. We'll see. But Zoe, sadly, the women's quad, didn't make it through the repechage. We'll be seeing them B final action. I think our thoughts with them, wishing them the very, very best for their B final to come later on, and it's a really encouraging group of athletes who we'll hopefully see tracking all the way through to Paris and having a big impact at Paris.
Yeah, they're, like you say, they're young athletes. They were all Olympic debutantes. It was a difficult race. I mean, it looked like they kind of caught a couple crabs early on in the race. I think maybe they were a little too close to the boys. And I've heard a lot, and you can see it, that steering is hard out there. We've heard that from coxes as well as athletes. The water's a bit lumpy. There's some sort of swirly wind. The boys apparently stick quite high up out the water. I think, the salt water element here. So if you do get tangled up in one of those buoys, it's more problematic than it might be on other courses. But then they recovered from that to actually then lead out the race and to kind of look like they were setting the pace. But it just looked like maybe they'd had to do too much to get themselves back there. And then when other crews started to move, they just didn't have that next gear to go to stay with the race. It's a shame, but they're new, they're hungry. This is going to be the start of hopefully the next 3 years for them to lead up to Paris, and hopefully we'll see all those guys there, because this is just the beginning for them.
You hope that this experience will be a positive one for them, because they'll have a B final, but because of the rules here for this event, they've got to be home. They've got to be heading home within 48 hours of that last race. So I think sort of a younger group of athletes coming to the games as a whole is a really big thing, isn't it? And seeing other sports besides your own and feeling part of the whole thing. Whereas this time it'll affect the GB Women's 8 as well, as if they don't manage it just right, that they'll be home within 2 or 3 days of that race. So they've got to make sure that they finish the regatta on a high, whatever event they end up in, and that they sort of frame it in the right way before they head home, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But on one positive, Sarah, to take away from that rep was seeing Australia. They're now through into the final, taking advantage of that second race, and they'll be having their third race in the A final.
Yeah, it was really awesome to see. The girls, they're all debutantes. They're a really young crew, a couple of them straight out of under 23s. They won final Olympic qualification. They were one of 4 crews that Australia sent over to that event, and the only crew to get it through FOQR. So it was really great to see. We've actually formed a group on Messenger of every senior woman that we could get in touch with who's rowed in the Australian quad at some stage, which includes me. I did it in 2011. And so it's so cool that all of these women who've raced the senior women's quad for Australia at World Championships or Olympic Games are sort of really getting behind this crew, sending them messages, and they know that we've formed this group. So it's a really lovely little group that we've got, and those girls are feeling that support from us, and I'm just so happy for them to see them through to the A final, because the first half of the race I really thought, no, they're out of this, they're going to be B final, and they just got better and better down the track. So it was really lovely to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And early in the hours we also saw the reps for the lightweight women's double sculls, the lightweight men's doubles. We saw the rep for the men's coxless 4, seeing the Netherlands and Romania qualifying. But the big one, another one we had all our attention on, was the rep for the women's coxless 4, Zoe. And it's great news to end this morning's debrief on. They've qualified, they're into the A final, and just like the quad, bring it on. Absolutely bring on the A final for this coxless 4.
Yeah, they did actually perform in a quite similar way to the quad. They had a good start, they led early, and then they just controlled the race, and the race came right back to them at the end. The Poles and the Romanians were fighting for that second place, which nearly took them through, but the race is only 2,000 metres. You don't need to be leading at 2,010 metres, you only need to be leading at 2,000 metres. And they held on to win that rep, and importantly, they also beat Canada by a long way, who beat them in their heat, which I really hope gives some confidence going forward. They looked so much better than they did in the heat. They looked calm, they looked collected, but they were still punchy through the water. So I'm just really pleased that they've kind of look like they've turned around what wasn't a great performance in the heat, really, and they're now kind of moving on the trajectory I was expecting to see them on. This four has had a difficult year. They have had, like everyone, limited racing, but on one of those races they were missing Karen Bennett. So, they haven't had much chance to perform together as a quartet, and maybe, like we said earlier, actually a repechage for them isn't the worst thing in the world. It's another chance to race. So I'm just really pleased to see them in that A final and hopefully ready to go.
But Martin, obviously they've stepped on in this rep, but they'll need to step on again, obviously, to get one back on the crews that beat them in their original heat and those who were performing well in the other heat as well.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like a different crew this morning, didn't it? And as Zoe said, they beat Canada, but I mean, there was almost a length there by within the first half of the race on Canada. It was just a different boat there, and I suppose you can look at the times from the heats and see how much they need to move on. But if they can make that sort of change from one race to the next, then anything's possible, isn't it? So yeah, they can definitely, that crew, step on from Great Britain's 8th place the last time the women's four raced at an Olympics. Yeah,
definitely. It's certainly 6th and upwards, but all eyes on the medal podium, of course.
Just an important note, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they've moved all the Tuesday racing as well as the Monday racing. So now Tuesday racing has gone, which would have been our first medal race for the men's quad. So that's moved from Tuesday to the Wednesday. Semi-finals for us, the lightweight women's double and the women's double, have moved also from Tuesday to Wednesday. Semi-finals for women's singles, so Vicky, have now moved from the Wednesday to the Thursday. So there's some sort of back on there as well. So if you're just waking up to this, good chance to have a couple days break from the middle of the night rowing action, but also just update your calendar.
So is there anything on Tuesday now?
No, Tuesday's been completely cancelled.
So
They're worried about the
cancelled.
weather again. Yeah, so Monday and Tuesday now, they've just cancelled all the racing.
And of course, that's daytime for us, so good to know that I'll get some work done on Monday, Tuesday.
It's interesting because that's more time potentially for that men's quad who've had to go through the rep. That's an extra day of recovery for them. So that might be useful, and also it'll bring racing back together for some of those other crews that are doubling up that we talked about. The women's pairs in the 4 for the Aussies, and then the women's pair in the 8 as well for New Zealand. So that might have some knock-on effect on them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Sarah, you said maybe some more work done. I think it's just another opportunity to branch out and watch some more sports and just watch the Olympics. It's only come around once every 4 years, so you might as well enjoy it.
That's true. Believe me, the TV will be on in the office.
That'll wrap up our 3rd edition of the Olympic Breakfast Debrief. My thanks to Martin, to Zoe and to Sarah for joining us for this breakfast debrief. And as Zoe said, well, you've got 2 mornings off now to regather some sleep, to regain some composure, and we'll go again later on in the week. But for now, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.